Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, the various boards and committees representing the town of Grafton will conduct their public meetings and hearings via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. All participants entering the meeting via a personal computer. Computer participants are required to rename themselves with their official first and last name. Computer participants are encouraged to click on the participants feature in Zoom to view all participants and to use the Q&A function to pose questions on the bottom of the screen. Computer participants may pin to a particular video screen. It is recommended to pin to either the chairperson or a staff member associated with the meeting. So at the beginning of the meeting, the chairman will identify himself or herself. The chair will conduct a roll call of the board and call the meeting to order, which it has been. All participants, excluding board members, will be muted throughout the meeting and must use the Q&A function. All participants are required to include their name and address when using the chat feature to pose a question through the chairperson. All documents displayed throughout the meeting will be controlled by the staff or the chairperson. If the chairman allows for public comments and questions, it will be conducted in the following sequence. The chairman will read public comments and questions received in advance of the meeting, followed by real-time board and/or applicant responses. The chair will then read comments, questions typed under computer participants in the Q&A feature, followed by real-time board and/or applicant responses. Computer participants must click on Q&A to enter their comment questions, and the staff or chair will address the question live to the board. It will be discussed and then marked answered by staff or chair. The chairman will ask if any other participants assessing the meeting have comments or questions. Board members needing to be recused at any point during the course of a meeting will be placed in a virtual waiting room by staff or chairperson. So with that, do you want to do a roll call or should? You're muted.
Again, I'm Bruce Spinney, the acting chair. I'm going to go around the room and ask for a roll call of all of the participants. Dan Kusher.
Here.
Eric Swenson.
Swenson here.
Elizabeth Haynes. Kurt Williams.
Here.
And Chris McGoldrick, the town planner.
Here.
All right, so we are on attendance. I'm going to look at the attendees, make sure none of our members are stuck in there. All right, brilliant. Okay, so welcome everybody. Again, if you're just popping into the attendees, the 25 Worcester Street conversation will begin no sooner than 7:30. I just want to reiterate because a few more, or actually 5 or 6 more people hopped in. I did put this in there just if we have business that we need to conduct as the trust minutes, contracts, bills to be paid and things like that. I typically like to do them at the front, especially if we have staff in attendance that needs to provide us input. So instead of making you show up to a meeting at 7 o'clock and perhaps wait an hour to get to the subject material that you're all here for, I put in a time, and I'll continue to add that time to the agenda. So you don't take time out of your day to come at 7 o'clock to watch us do business, just to wait for your subject material. That being said, there was a lot of correspondence that we did get for the 25 Worcester Street project. We're adding as much of it to record as we can. If comments come in within that 48-hour period of us posting, it might not make it to the website before the meeting. Feel free to continue to engage the planning office and myself through email to add anything or if anything was missed. All right, the first thing I want to talk about tonight is we had Jen Goldson in last meeting. I've had a couple more conversations with consultants and then another round with the CMRPC, who probably is not going to be able to provide us with the type of assistance that's 40B and trust specific. We did have some more conversations about the staff position in the planning office, filling both roles, so partly subsidized by the housing trust. After putting like everything together, I thought the best approach would be a hybrid, which would be to bring in a Jen Goldson type of person under a a la carte type of approach and contracts to handle some specific items that we're going to need a lot of expertise on in this process. And they could be further down the road and we could opt in or out. I don't feel that with the price range, we're going to be able to acquire a new position in the staff, even if they were offering us, 15, 20 hours a week. It's probably going to be of the caliber that's going to handle some of our logistical support, running our meetings and things of that nature, and probably not be able to provide us with the high end type of direction that we might need. It's just a matter of who we find for that position and whether he or she has had a real experience in affordable housing. Those are kind of high thresholds to set, I think, for the budget range that the town is looking to do. I'm guessing our contribution for those type of hours is probably going to be somewhere between 15 and 25,000 a year, somewhere in there for our side of it. And then consulting fees, they range the gambit and it's typically an hour base. I don't have the authority to actually negotiate with Jen Goldson. I would like to bring her back as long as the trust has a firm idea of, that's the direction we want to go. And that would be basically, she would provide us with hours. We would go out to bid and match that up against other consultants. Unfortunately, there are just not many out there that do this type of work. And there's certainly not, of those few, there's very few that have an affinity for the town level side. Most of them are going to be on the developer side. Extremely knowledgeable, but probably not willing to do the work that Jen Goldson would do. So I loaded this up front to just take in any more comments or concerns. If this is a good approach, if you want to add a little bit to it, now's the time to kind of hash this out. And then I can put something concrete as far as hourly numbers are concerned in front of everybody at our next meeting, and we can actually engage. So I'll wait for any response. Just show me a hand if you want to communicate with me. All right. Hearing, Mr. Kusher.
Yeah, I think sounds like a good idea. I definitely agree that that more like expertise based help is something that we want to look at. So that's good. I think we can do this and reevaluate after we've been doing it for a while, but I think it might be helpful to still have somebody who's more experienced and also like either part-time or full-time working with us to kind of have that sort of focus on Grafton and really looking at for opportunities that that we might not know to look for, and that somebody who's just working on a consultant basis might not have sort of the time to be searching around for. But yeah, this definitely is a great starting point, I think, and we might decide this is a good place to stop too. So yeah.
So there are a few hurdles that we have to do this, public procurement type of thing. I will get an outline to everybody via email because there are certain thresholds that as soon as you hit a certain threshold as far as monetary contribution from the actual trust, it has to be a bidding process. Some things are more specific and they have a limit that as long as you're under that, it can just be a solo decision type of thing. And also past performance comes into play. One chat piece. No, it's actually not. The trust has several projects that we're looking to take on, and there's also administrative functions that we need to account for. So while the 25 Worcester Street project would probably be a very large project that we would need a lot of heavy help with, I believe that a lot of the stuff that's going to come in as we move forward with all of our other initiatives, a person of that caliber will provide us with the support we're going to need. All right. You're welcome. So let's see. Did everybody have a chance to review the meeting minutes? The one correction was May 5th is actually May 10th, I believe, Mr. Kusher, and then that's 2017, and then March 18th, 2021. Everybody's had a chance to review? So, Mr. Kusher, I will entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of May 10th, 2017 and March 18th of 2021 as drafted.
So moved.
Christian, thank you. And the second, Mr. Swenson?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? By a roll call, starting with Mr. Williams.
Williams, aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And Bruce is also an aye. Okay, so we put Hudson Ave back on the agenda. Dan did some yeoman's work for us, putting together what a draft warrant article will look like. If you listened to the last meeting and were in attendance as we were going through this process over the last couple of years and where it stalled out, I think Hudson Ave is a real development opportunity. I think we should take another pass at it. And I think the time is probably now to do so. So Dan gave everybody a copy of what an article would look like. There's some information we still need to run down. Dan, do you mind just giving everybody here a quick update on your conversation with the clerk's office?
Yeah, so if you haven't had a chance to look at the warrant article, basically I sort of based it on the original article that set this land aside for partly for the cemetery and partly for a town dump. And it refers to, oh, there it is. So it refers to a plan. The plan entitled Plan of Old Dump and Cemetery Land, Millbury Street, Grafton, with a specific date on file at the town clerk's office. Long story short, town clerk's office could not find that plan. So so first of all, this wording would obviously need to be changed to something else because that plan is not on file with the town clerk. But it also raises another issue of where is the land divided up? Which part is actually for the cemetery and which part is for that town dump, and which part are we, going for? So I actually have no clue how this would get resolved. I feel like there's probably some kind of legal answer involved when there's a plan that's supposed to be sort of the reference for the land that is under the control of the cemetery commissioners, and that plan can't be found. So I guess I would ask either Chris or Bruce if they have any insight about what the actual legal reality is.
Yeah, I mean,
Bruce, you're muted.
Killing it tonight, aren't I? So for the parcel, it's got a couple different legs to it. What we were looking for is if you're on Hudson, in the corner of Hudson and Millbury on the right, I believe Mr. Robbins, who's in attendance tonight, so feel free to chat and let us know if I'm incorrect, but on the opposite side of the street is Article 97 land, which of course has a lot of hurdles to pass to remove it and to use it. It's also a lot of ledge, and it's not very conducive for building. You might be able to do something with it, but as far as ease of this project, it would have to be the other side. We need to find the plan to see how everything is outlaid. Chris, if you could just look through some of the records on your end and perhaps pass it along to the planning board with some of that legacy experience in town, and perhaps they know. I know this goes back to the early 60s, so it might be hard to find that. And then if it's not in the clerk's office, we might want to check directly with the cemetery commission, but they didn't have one when they came before the select board while I was on the board. And we had this discussion. There was some semblance of a plan or an idea, basically, of when the lot was going to be utilized. And that was somewhere between the 20 and 30 years out mark. As we looked at kind of how these things get produced, 25 years is probably a good number to look at. Which, for some of us there, like we discussed last week, didn't, stalling the project for that was a little bit difficult for us to swallow. Anyways, I will reach out to the cemetery commission through the select board. Getting this on Springtown meeting might be difficult at this point in the timeline, but I'm hesitant to wait to do anything that we're trying to form an initiative on, because it gets lost so quickly. So if our plan is to put it on in the fall town meeting, I still want to move forward with it. Dan, do you mind just collaborating with myself and Chris to help me with some of the legwork?
Yep, that'd be fine. It seems so odd to me that they would set aside this land for what we're now learning wouldn't be needed until like 90 years later.
Well, I mean, a lot of that could have happened as more, property came online or usage changed, so a lot could have happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s that they didn't need to use this particular land. And it was being used for the brush dump for so long, perhaps that had something to do with it as well. Finding a clear answer is something that we're going to have to uncover, because when we propose this at town meeting, while the trust has the authority to propose warrant articles, this is something that we really want to go to the select board with and partner with them to get the momentum we're going to need to clear some of the hurdles and make a strong pitch at town meeting 4, because you really don't want to go to town meeting 4 and argue with the cemetery commissioners on the value of this property to their plan. We'll provide them with the upfront opportunity to get us a plan and actually put some numbers to it, and then we can kind of go to the next step. But it's in our back pocket to be able to propose something like this and put it on everybody's radar. So thank you for the work you did. I appreciate it, Dan. Does anybody have anything else on this particular subject before we move on? Is everybody in agreement? And a head nod is fine with me on moving forward with this so we maintain momentum, but with the realistic option of having this be in fall town meeting. Okay, good. So we will continue to move forward with that. Welcome, Mr. Prisby. And let's see, 60 Depot Street. So before we change gears into active projects, I'm going to have Eric recuse. We don't need to exile him to the attendees. Just keep your mood on for me, Eric. Maybe turn to the right so you can't see the camera either. I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that. Well, that will work too. Okay, so 60 Depot Street. I sent as much correspondence as I could find on the particular parcel. There's not a lot of records there. You did see some of the comments that we get back from some of the department heads, paying particular attention to Conservation Commission's comments. Because it's low in the floodplain there, the floodplain actually does come into the parcel, which really limits your ability to have a septic system there. Now, that being said, I think it can be done. The quality of the development as far as quantity is concerned is going to be very restrictive. But we, in the past, we've proposed these type of, stick structures, 3-deckers, 2-deckers, duplex, small duplex of something with the Habitat of Humanity. And they have resources at their disposal to help us with this. And there's other developers that will pair with small projects like this, but both on the local side as well. But typically when you get this low in number, it would be a heavy subsidy from the trust itself to make it work, the numbers work. There's a lot of challenges to it. So this parcel was taken by a tax taking in 2018. So basically the town put it in its portfolio through that, but it had been abandoned for decades before that. So the rumor was that it shared a septic and some resources with the house next to it. There was some bartering back and forth trying to get it sold, or at least gifting the land, or not gifting, but selling the land to the neighborhood when they purchased that side of it. None of that actually worked. So there's going to be some hurdles for that property. But as far as something that's just been sitting for 3 years boarded up, it is a massive eyesore. Nobody seems to want to do anything with it. Nobody seems to know anything about it. It doesn't have any sewer capacity, and I don't believe there's water there either. So if we can, I think for this one, I don't think the process is to go to town meeting and try to get it sent over to the trust. It'd be put some of the principals in the room, probably the select board being the first place to start, and go petition them and say, look, we want to see if there's something viable here with us. And if we do, this is kind of what we see with it. Give us some authority to go and actually probe and start to look at some of the stuff on our own side of things. I'm going to look at the question and answer real quick. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So I apologize if I can't pronounce your name, but I'm just going to say Stratos. I didn't leave a lot of the time in this tonight for this. I was just introducing the subject. But I do appreciate you coming online. If I give you my email, can you correspond with me directly? And at our next meeting, I'll provide some live time for it and get the rest of the information together. Is that okay with you? I'm going to give him a moment to respond. He's typing. Okay. I apologize. I told everybody we moved to the 25 Worcester Street discussion at 7:30. No, you can't actually hear from the attendees booth. It's all chat. But for this particular discussion, when we discuss this in a little bit more detail and give it 15 or 20 minutes, we'll bring you in as a panelist and you'll be able to fill everybody in on some of the history from your perspective on it, which will be very, very helpful as we plot a path forward. So I'll make sure I either reach out to you or you reach out to me through the planning office, and we'll make sure we exchange information and get all the relevant information together. So I think there is something there. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be small in volume, but it's worth doing. And the thing's been sitting there dead for a long, long time. And it's going to end up being knocked down. I don't think there's any other way around that. But that's another project that typically has a lot of hurdles come with it as well. Dan, please.
So is this the kind of thing that we would work with Habitat on? Or is this something that, because you mentioned it would be a significant investment for the number of units, the trust just went for it?
Sure. Ed?
Yeah, so Dan, it's been our experience that projects like this would be probably something you would partner with Habitat for building. And then when it came down to the lottery, you work with Chapter or somebody like that. But they're not particularly cost effective. And back before we had the Pulte money, we were looking at doing something like this in North Grafton. That would have been a tear down or tear it down to the studs anyway, and then rebuild and do a 2-family or something like that. And it was going to cost a lot of money. It was like, $400,000 worth of trust money at a time where we had about $400,000. So, now that we get a little bit more and we're doing other projects and they could all be cost effective, this would be something we could take a look at.
Okay, anybody else? And then I'm going to move to 25 Worcester Street. Elizabeth, Eric, you can come on back. Kurt, you all okay with me putting this on the next agenda and moving forward? Head nod's fine. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move this discussion to 25 Worcester Street. We are continuing to put renderings in front of everybody. So I want to make sure I reiterate some of the things I mentioned last time, and then I'm going to continue on kind of adding some perspective from the trust members on what type of commitments are going to be required as we move forward a little bit. So this is a process by which in a public setting, we're doing what developers would do in a sit-down room with a bunch of employees. We cannot handle this in that way. We need to send me basically to be a conduit to the engineer to provide us with renderings and those things, to give us a template on different items that we could choose, what works there, what doesn't work there, what the trust palette is, and things of that nature. And then we got to go back and forth and keep sending these iterations in. So tonight we have 4 more renderings to look at some of the other designs that you could do there. There are still quite a few more to go. We did get a lot of correspondence back, and I really appreciate that from the neighborhood and some from not in the neighborhood as well. Nearly all of it I passed on to you. It was very productive. I believe 90% of it was very professionally done, and it was encouraging to see. There was, some that were not. Everybody, of course, can continue to email me, but I'm only going to send along for public digestion things that are productive, not slanderous, not inflammatory, not intimidating. I'm going to go ahead and just trash that stuff. So, everybody who's participating in this process, we're going to continue to encourage you to do so, and we're going to continue to have you more intricately involved in our process as we move forward. But like I said last meeting, this is very much just to get the trust up to speed on what can actually happen on that site so we can make decisions on the trust's behalf. And then it moves to the other phases of the LIP process, which is public hearings, zoning, comprehensive plan, if it goes that way, select board. There's a whole bunch, a myriad of other different bodies that this goes through, and it's all in a very public setting. So if your voice doesn't get heard tonight and you had suggestions, I am acting on all those suggestions. And as we have the next couple of meetings, I will continue to incorporate those. And then the people that offered those suggestions, I'll make sure that you're part of the panelists to kind of let us know, how you came to that decision and why you think it's valuable, et cetera, et cetera. Tonight, I just have four from Waterman to kind of go through, give me some feedback on it. Let me know what other iterations you want to see. And then we'll plan the next meeting out. These are all going to take a couple weeks to do. That's just the nature of the industry right now. So your patience is, I'm going to ask for more patience as we move forward. We're going to make our very best level attempts to make sure that everybody gets incorporated into this process. But the trust is going to come first. And then we're going to move into our decision modes, and then we're going to encourage that other dialogue. The other thing I wanted to bring up is when you're looking at a project of this size and scope and stuff that volunteer boards are doing, this is not something that we're going to lay on the lap of the planning office and do. The planning office is going to start wearing too many hats to advocate for us. We have to advocate for ourselves. The town planner works not for per se, but when this goes through the planning process, he's going to have different people that he's going to report to. And while he can be an advocate for affordable housing, he's going to be wearing his town planner hat. So I do not want to put that office in that position, which means we have to take up those torches of the advocacy. So as you're looking at your commitment in time to the trust, as we unroll this, there's some benchmarks that I want you to take into consideration. Typically, you're going to see 2 or 3 meetings a week that you're going to have to attend. Some will be trust meetings, some will be subcommittee. And that's going to be spread out amongst all the trust members, of course. So not everybody's going to have to go to these, but at a certain point, we're going to have to engage the EDC. We're going to have to engage in a somewhat collective body with the select board, the planning board, and all the other cohort groups in town that we're going to want as part of this discussion. And then, of course, we need to build, that public consensus as well as we move through the comprehensive plan process, if that's where the road we do go on. So I just want to make sure that as we kind of put all this together, it's a little bit informal right now, but as we move forward, we're going to have to guarantee a quorum. We want everybody here as part of this. Now, if you miss a meeting or two, that's fine. You can, of course, see the recording, but we need to have everybody here, and we need to start to delegate that type of work out. So what we're trying to do, and when we get to that point, is to make a project that we can package up, that looks good, that looks clean, that looks like what we want, get it through the system, and also in parallel, get a developer that's willing to actually do the work. And there's a lot of nuance there, and it's going to be a lot of time. So I want to make sure that everybody is kind of on board with that as we're moving forward. And it's fine if you don't have that capacity, but I just want to know because we're 7 members, and I certainly can't do this on my own. And I don't think 2 or 3 of us are going to be able to get it done on our own. So that's just my spiel in the front. Now let's take a look at some of the renderings if we can. We'll go through all 4, take a look at them. We'll leave them up there for a couple minutes. Feel free to chat. I can see everybody's faces on the side. So for this particular process, I don't mind if all the panelists have their mics off, and just kind of, interject and have a conversation. If you have something to say, of course. This first one, iteration is essentially that townhouse style. You see this in a couple of different places, a lot of different places around town, especially on 122 and 140. If you're going down just before and just after McGill, where it hits Providence Road, some of those units in there that you can see right from the street. I think one of them is Blackberry Lane, and then right across the street from that, this is that style. So some garages, a good amount of units. It's a good way to construct. There's a lot of cost savings and efficiencies here, so it's palatable to a developer. In general, these would be sold and not rented, but they could also be rented as well. So there's a couple different avenues here. The density is way down. The use of the 2 acres is not nearly as efficient as a much larger building, but it's another option, and it would have a significant impact, I believe, from a trust perspective on affordable housing in the community. There's some other details there that, if it exactly looks like this, but this is a general feel of what's going to fit for this style here. Does anybody have any comments? And of course, if you're, I can't see you if you're in attendance, but just go ahead and type in the chat. If you have something, I'm going to record it, make sure it goes through. If I don't get to you and you're in the, you're not in the panelist dialogue, you all, I believe, have probably emailed me in some fashion. Just put together a quick constructive outline on these. And unfortunately, I don't believe I labeled these. Chris, do you see a label at the bottom?
Yeah, they're A, B, C, and D.
Okay, thank you. Reference the actual one for me, if you would.
Bruce?
Yes, sir.
So what are we looking at here? About 20 units?
Yep, 20
All
town.
right. And if those were sold, then if it was a 40B, we would have to get what, 25% of those. So, but we're looking at 5 units. That would be subsidized housing inventory units.
It would be, yep.
Okay.
Yep, it's all you get against SHI. Now, if in that bargaining with the developer, you could get 7 out of it and subsidize a couple more construction wise. You might get that.
Okay.
But just remember, as you go beyond what's going to be required, the trust is going to have to contribute a little. Now you're contributing the land in whole or in part. So that has a dollar value from a developer's perspective as well. So keep that in the back of everybody's minds. Does anybody else have anything on what I believe is D? Give everybody a couple more minutes just to look at it. And, I assume you looked at it at home, but Kessel would be an entry and an exit. Utilizing that street with some detention basins at the ends, that's stormwater, essentially. So those are open bay detention. In this particular one, they can be storm cell scepters underneath the ground and stuff like that. But this is, probably the most cost-effective approach. If you want to see something like that, and it's very small scale. If you're heading up Wheeler Road to Brigham Hill, right by the community barn, as soon as you hit the community barn's property, you look to the left. There's a couple shallow detention basins that are on the side. That's something to give yourself a familiarity with what a detention basin is going to look like. Depth and culverts and things of that nature is be pretty common. There's a few around town if you're driving around. Elizabeth.
So if only 5 of these is going to be affordable, is there a way, I feel like there would possibly be a way, and if they are all for purchase rather than rent, I think the trust would be able to fund a smaller program or development if we just put only 5 affordable units on instead of having to work with a developer and build all of that extra stuff. I think that that there's a potential that we could, using the trust money, fund and then get it back once the units are sold. The building of only those 5 units.
So you're saying like a townhouse cluster, taking one of these clusters and just having it be a cluster of 5. That's it. That's all you do on the site. And then you'd subsidize all 5 of them so they would be affordable.
Sure, why not?
Okay, so that's a consideration. You wouldn't be able to do that all with trust money. You would still have to partner in some way. We can add that to a list of stuff we want to see rendered. How we just do a small condense. Another thing we were going to do is just go by local. I'm sorry, one second. Let me collect my thoughts here for a second. By what would be a special permit process? That was something that was brought up in some of the correspondence that you've seen, some of the emails. We will have a rendering of that. We also got some feedback from David Robbins, who's on the planning board and has some intimate knowledge about our rules and regulations and subdivision bylaws. So you saw some of the responses that went back and forth, but we will still have a rendering of that particular design. The one caveat to that is, Elizabeth, is if it's just 5 and we're subsidizing each unit and they're for sale and we want all of them to be affordable, we can certainly pitch it. Finding a developer to do a project of that size, we'd have to heavily subsidize it, especially if it's for sale. But it is a worthwhile exercise. So as I sent you the links and you sent them to other people as well, I feel using a modular building model would be a good way. The building company would come in, dig foundations, do all of the hookups and everything as part of the price. And then we could recoup that
once they are sold.
So recouping the money as far as the trust perspective is concerned is a little bit of a fuzzy area for me.
Maybe not entirely, but at least a portion of it. Like that way we would be subsidizing it, but then once they were purchased, whatever portion we were not subsidizing, we would get.
Because what we don't want to do is get into the loan type of arrangement where we're going to say we give $500,000 to subsidize 5 units, 100,000 per unit for the construction side of it. And then they would have to return that $500,000 to us at some point or some part of that. It's in some type of loan structure, or if they have excess profits, like they do really, really well. AMI is at a certain point, so construction materials come down, which I don't foresee over the next couple of years. And they make an abundance of money on these. The profit at a certain point can come back to us. One of the reasons why we got the Pulte settlement is because Pulte Homes on Milford Street there, were in excess of what was the allowable profit on that particular development. And then of course we fought back and forth on whether or not that was a real number, and then we settled, and we get a certain amount back, and of course that's what's in our coffer, so to speak. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, just one more point. So Habitat for Humanity also has affordable home buyers obtain a mortgage, and they can also use the volunteers to subsidize the build. I'm just saying that there are a lot of options that we can look at, and I believe that we can do a lot more independently than maybe we've thought we could in the past.
Understood. And the Habitat is somebody that we've reached out to in the past, and we've had a working relationship. While we haven't done any projects with them, there is still a rapport there, or should be. And I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be in some of the next stages of this to provide input and perhaps to provide a project scope that we can compare against some of these others as well. That's just a matter of time of lining all those things up, Elizabeth. But it's certainly, if they were to come in here and say, yes, we can probably do something here, it may not be as aesthetically pleasing as, some of the neighborhood folks have, wanted out of this particular project, but it's certainly worth looking at. And I don't think we're not in the business right now of stopping any idea that might be of note. It's more the other direction, which is to provide everybody here who doesn't have a lot of development experience and any 40B experience, the plethora of things that you can do in the 40B process. And then we can reduce scope, or we can reduce, project size and things of that nature. But I want to make sure everybody knows what they actually can do on the trust. So I will continue to add things to this, Elizabeth, and if you find anything more, of course, please let me know of different groups that I might not be aware of course. The one chat I did see, which was setbacks and things of that nature, is, most of your rules and regulations, the setbacks, of course, are in here. 40B gives you some latitude, and in a lot of cases, a lot of latitude to relieve yourself from certain aspects of local rules and regulations. And it's by design. Now, whether or not we want to do that and probe that deeply into it, it may be something that we want to do. I did show you a 60 units rendering in the last meeting. That is certainly something that you could do in a LIB process, and it's not going to meet most of your density requirements for the zoning that's there. Does anybody else have anything on this?
Yeah, I do, Dan. So I just want to mention that we are, in terms of the 10% subsidized housing inventory requirement that 40B puts on us, we are 335 units away from 10%. So this plan that we have on the screen that only gives us 5 units toward that, and then gives us 15 units of market rate housing inventory. It doesn't seem like it's really making a dent in the problem. And then to take away those 15 market rate units, I think it is just a step in the wrong direction. The market rate units, they're not, affordable, but they help to add to the supply side of the supply and demand equation, and that will help. So I think we should consider some of the other options that we have tonight that will give us more units in the subsidized housing inventory and more units total.
Okay, so that's all part of, this ongoing discussion. So I'll show you some more density things, and I'll also show on the other side of that spectrum some smaller density, but more subsidized. So not adding to the inventory. But I hear what you're saying with, taking, 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. You're at 25%, so you're still going to get a better ratio. But yes, you have to discount the regular units you're putting on the inventory as well. So yes, you're not really getting, if your goal is to get to that 10% threshold, but that should only be one side of the goal. There's an ideology to this that is just to provide suitable housing for as many people as you can to enter into the community. And that's another discussion that we should think about in the back of our minds, is how much we want to subsidize some of these units. Because if you look at our AMI and, that threshold you're going to be at, a lot of these units at market rate, even at 80 or 70% of market rate, are going to be well beyond the reach of some of the people that we want to move in. One thing to consider is, as Chris and I were talking before about that assistant town planner position, it's probably $45,000 to $60,000 a year. Somebody right out of school, perhaps somebody with just starting out in that field, and that's a tough income range, and they're probably going to be priced out of the community that they're actually working for and supporting. So that's the other side of this. Elizabeth, do you have one more thing? And I want to get to the next rendering.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Dan real quickly. And I'm not saying that I want to limit the number of total developments or units in the town necessarily, but I'm just saying for this particular site, maybe it would be better to do fewer but 100% affordable units. Like, so fewer units total, but each one of them is 100% affordable.
This is the only site we have right now.
Right now, yes, but for future projects, maybe, focus on quantity more than quality. But at this particular site, maybe we don't need to focus on the quantity, considering
I don't like
where
the
it
politics. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't like the politics of talking about this particular site versus another one, because it suggests that there's a better place to put it in somebody else's neighborhood. And I assure you, having gone through this in other neighborhoods, you're going to get the same reaction from that neighborhood as well. So really the only question that ought to be on the table for us is what is the long-term benefit for housing in Grafton with this particular site? And what's the long-term benefit of the trust that wants to go on continuing to develop affordable housing after this particular development is done? And that means we're going to have to work with other neighborhoods in good faith. And that means we're going to have collegial conversations with people in good faith. And that means we're going to have discussions explaining to a whole different group of people what affordable housing is, why they shouldn't be afraid of it, and the benefit that can inure to Massachusetts. And Dan's right. Studies have shown it's not just about affordable housing, but market rate housing. The more market rate housing you put in an area, the more it eases the burden on people buying the housing. Ask any realtor right now. There's at least one watching this right now who would have to admit that during COVID, supply is down, so prices are up. You put a place in the market.
Ed, I know, Ed. I'm actually looking for a house myself right now.
Listen.
Okay,
I understand you're stressed out about that. So this is how we can help do that. This particular development has been marketed as a 55 and older development. The next time, happy to look at more apartment rate housing for everybody.
And have we done any sort of due diligence to find out exactly how much of over 55 housing we need in town, seeing as how we just put a bunch of over 55 housing down on Summerfield Court, and there's going to be more over 55 housing over at the old DPW site.
Sure.
I haven't seen any papers or any studies done so far that say exactly how many people in Grafton who are over the age of 55 need affordable housing like this.
It's all in your affordable housing production plan. You should read that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
I
it,
have.
You must have missed it.
there is a, Dan, I'm just gonna chime in real quick, and then I'm gonna wrap it up on this one. We're gonna move to the next rendering so we can cycle our way through. A lot of the debate we're having right now, I would like to have at the tail end of the renderings, because I think we're gonna vet out a lot of things as we go through this process. I don't want to spend too much time in the 55 plus between affordable and senior housing and stuff like that. What we need to focus on what we can do with the site. The article says that it was gifted to us or given to the trust to move forward with an affordable project, because that's what the trust does. So it has to be considered. It explicitly says in the language that there has to be 55 plus housing here. Impacts on 55 plus housing as far as the housing production plan is concerned, I've read through it. I was part of the process of getting it established and updated. There is evidence to support that there is a strong need in the community for 55 plus, perhaps not enough evidence to do a whole affordable 55 plus housing project. As more inventory comes online, I don't believe any of the inventory that has come online in the past year in town would have a significant impact on the price stability of the town's market rate units. So if you're looking from a perspective on how much bang for the buck you get here before it actually dips and actually makes a legitimate impact on housing prices in town, I don't think you're going to get that with any scale of the project here. Now, you might get it with the 100 units going up on Upton Street. You might get it with some type of nuance in the Pine Street development, but those ones have not been developed yet. And until they actually get a shovel in the ground and become viable projects, which they may or may not be, we need to move forward like we want to make a significant impact on the housing index. Now we'll have to continue with those arguments later. Dan, real quick on this rendering, and then let's get to the next one.
I'm good.
All right. Chris, could you move us to the next one? So this is basically just downscaling the type, repositioning, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, a little bit more green space, a little bit nicer look to it than just density. Again, we're not showing the renderings of what the buildings actually look like. You can look around town for as nice or as unattractive as possible that would fit these type of densities. I did send a picture of a density and a look that would look like this. We'll throw the picture up in a little bit. That's one of the JPEGs that that had been sent over, Chris. These are two basically 20 apiece apartments. You can see how they're laying out. The stormwater management, the parking. Again, no egress out of Kessel Street, which I would prefer. You have excellent sight lines going up and down. I know grading was a concern in some people's perspective. Grading is site work. It can be a large portion of cost of development. In this particular site, seeing that we haven't done any real, soil testing or dug any test pits out there or holes to see what's underneath, you really don't know that until you kind of get to the next layer. But you can grade, you can retain, you can have walkouts. You can make these look like a nice little apartment complex with these two buildings. And you can make them look relatively nice. Dan, please.
Yes. So I was driving down Worcester Street recently and like trying to actively look around, safely while driving at the other buildings that are currently on the street, and there are a few 3-story like single family homes, or maybe I guess 2.5 story. I'm not sure exactly what the right term is there, but and then there's the State Police Museum, which is 3 stories. I feel like if that this kind of building, if the exterior is done to match the types of homes that are on that street, I don't think it would really look that out of place. I would be interested to see if maybe there could be 3 smaller, slightly smaller buildings. So I think these are 2 20-unit buildings, and then we'll talk about it later, but there's one with 3 20-unit buildings. That's the one that we saw last time. I think it would be interesting to see if there could be like 3 15-unit buildings or something that might look a little bit smaller and might look a little bit more like just very large, made to look from the outside like very large single family homes to sort of fit that neighborhood's look, while still providing a sizable chunk of that remaining SHI that we need.
Okay, I'll pass that along. And if people are hesitant to talk tonight about these because you need some more time to digest it or things like that, feel free to send any comments to the planning office, and then we'll integrate them into our communications with the engineers and things of that nature. Kurt, please.
The previous rendering, I think, showed the square footage per unit. I don't know if we have any clarity or additional clarity on sort of the unit options within this rendering versus the previous one. Obviously, those were, I think, townhomes versus the apartments. So square footage wise per unit, I don't, maybe we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but just wondering.
We haven't, but for perspective on like the, what style, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom and stuff like that, pull up the Apprentice Place comprehensive plan that was decided on. That was a couple of years, is still, of course, it hasn't been built yet, but that went through a pretty established process, and you can kind of pick through what those actual apartment buildings look like. And generally speaking, this is what you're going to get here. Going through the 40B process, there is going to be nuance to it where you're going to have to provide different styles. It's not just going to be all 1 bedroom fixed. You will have that, but in some ways you can do that. In other ways, you have to have a little bit of a variety there. There's a couple of questions asking for copies of RFPs. We haven't actually sent this out to RFP. We're in the decision-making process about what we want to see there. When we narrow it down on what we actually want to do, as far as a trust perspective is concerned, then we'll move forward with, trying to find a developer who will actually do it, construct it to what we want. We're not there yet. I would say we're probably another couple of months away from that point. But of course, everything will be public record. If that's not what you're actually looking for, please just feel free to put another comment up there. But I'm going to move on to the next rendering unless anybody else has anything on this one. Okay, so here's you getting into a little bit more of a hybrid, where perhaps you can start to kind of dance that line of a 55 plus housing down at the bottom, perhaps some apartments with some general affordability up at the top. This dices it up a little bit. I mean, you can kind of walk your way through it. It does not have egress onto Castle, which is a good thing. Just managing traffic on the site. It still uses good curb cuts into Worcester Street with plenty of sight line and minimal traffic impacts. This is a way to go. I don't see many developments like this, but it's not to say that you can't phase this and do 2 separate pieces. But take a look. Give me 2 or 3 seconds. Give me some comments on it.
So Bruce, quick question. If we were to go this route, then we would need 25% of the apartments at least to be affordable to get credit for all 20 in the apartments. And then we would only get credits for SHI for the affordable units that were sold on the townhouses, right?
If you look at the clear letter of it, you would think it's that way. I'm not entirely sure it is that way. I couldn't find a real application for this particular hybrid, but I only got it a few days ago and was only really able to kind of go through it. So I don't know if Chris has seen one in his tenure, working with affordable projects, but
Yes, I don't know if I'm understanding the question entirely, but just in terms of the affordable units and the spread between the townhouses and the actual apartment buildings, a lot of times the regulations, these hybrid projects get a little difficult in that calculation, as Bruce is mentioning. The affordable units need to be spread out throughout the entire development. There may be ways to kind of split it so that it's technically 2 projects, but in order to qualify for the SHI, it does need to be distributed throughout the entire project as it's proposed. So
Dan, please.
I just kind of feel like either we want to do the apartments or we want to do the townhomes. I think it's this kind of just gives us half of whatever we think is better and half of the other one. And I think if you're, it's going to give us fewer units than what was it, Plan C, which is the 2 20-unit apartment buildings. This will give us fewer total units, but it feels like there's the site is more full of housing buildings, I guess. So I guess I don't really see the advantage to this unless we really wanted some ownership units, but we wanted also some more units. I don't know. I guess I just don't really see any real upside to this one.
It's at first glance, it feels like a compromise between the 2, opposing sides of, stick buildings that are just one-offs and then an apartment building, and then cramming them together and taking the worst parts of it and making a project out of it. I don't think it's good usage of the actual space that's available. I think as far as density is concerned, if you were to even go to 40 units and 2 aesthetically pleasing housing complexes, you're retaining a lot more space than you're going to if you're trying to kind of marry everything together and get every last inch of it. If you're getting every last inch of it, you should be doing 60 to 80 units and having 3 large buildings like was rendered last time. So if that's the avenue that you're looking at, kind of hodgepodging these things together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we have it in front of us, so I can very confidently say that I don't like it. But
fair enough. That's what we're trying to do too. We're trying to root out the things that we don't like as well. Okay, so we have 1 more to go. Oh, no, we already been here, I think. It should be. Do we only go A through D?
Yeah, this one is, this is the 4th one. This is the same one that we had last time. I'm pretty sure it's the same one.
It looks like the same one to me. But it's another look at it, contrasted with the other ones. Now that you've seen kind of this hodgepodge here, it does not cost a lot of money for us to look at 1 apartment building and flex the size of that as well. I was kind of going to put those in as we get to the next phase of this, so you can kind of see apartment versus townhouse. The other thing we want to program in is some smaller houses, and then of course, developments that are more suitable for habitat to build, like Elizabeth had mentioned, and also something that conforms with local zoning if they were able to get a special permit from the planning board for it, which again, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Elizabeth, please, anything on this one? Or are we moving on to broader topics?
Real quick, I just found this. I just want to say, in response to Ed, the housing production plan, and I quote, identified 579 renter households spending too much of their income on existing housing. Seniors comprise about 30% of those with cost burdens. That means that 173 units. The DPW and Pine Street projects are proposing more than 400 new senior units, which is more than 173. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right, well, if I can respond to that, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've had any number of people tell me how many units that they're going to plan and what's going to happen in the future. And so far, none of it's happened, first. And second, that way may well be true as far as seniors in Grafton goes, but as you probably know, or I'm sure you've done the research that would tell you, Massachusetts is the single most expensive state in the entire country to grow old in. So we're actually not just talking about a need for people right here in Grafton, but we're talking about a need for people in all of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I'm glad that Pine Street is a sparkle in someone's eye at this point. But, when they open up, and I hope that they do, I'm sure they'll provide some relief for the overwhelming need for senior housing in Massachusetts, and not just senior housing, but housing in general. But for the time being, this trust has to do its job too. And this is the proposal. This is what we took to town meeting. And to be perfectly frank with you, Elizabeth, the conversation about whether or not it's senior or not is kind of a waste of time because we've moved past that. This is what was given to us at town meeting. This is what I believe to be the restriction on the use of the property. And this is what we're moving forward with. So I think the choice before us is whether or not you want to do larger apartments or townhouses or something even smaller.
Anybody else with the renderings? I don't mind granting a little bit of time for some higher level dialogue, but just like I referenced before, I think as soon as we get all of the iterations and kind of the entire portfolio of what we can do there, then we should start having some of these more ideological debates. I will, just as one correction, looking at what was proposed up at the old DPW building, only 10% of those units were to be considered affordable. And it's not an actual affordable project. So if it push came to shove, and that project needed viability, the first place they're going to go, and historically speaking, they always go, because I did serve on planning board when a lot of subdivisions came in, and it was always our push, is the affordable numbers. So, once you're out of the 40B process and in a mainstream process, the ability to force a developer to do something becomes very difficult. And again, those projects are nowhere close to being developed. When the land gets purchased and the permits get sent and the market actually dictates that they can meet their pro formas to build these things, which can be cumbersome, seeing that you're paying twice as much for wood as you were last year, you're going to see some hesitation on some of these larger projects as well. So perhaps you're only going to see 40 or 50 units go, and GSX decides that they're not going to move forward on the Upton Street project for a while. So from the trust perspective, I think generally speaking, we want to hone in on what's before us, and then see what we want to do with that, and not worry about outside forces. It's difficult enough for us to get any traction whatsoever. And more affordable housing than the 10% threshold is not a bad thing. The idea behind 40B, that carrot at the end of the stick is that 10% for, communities like us, which we value, because a lot of land can be really eaten up easily in the 40B process, and we can be run over a little bit in that process. But to have 15% affordability in town is probably a good thing to a lot of people. who need that housing, as you, of course, you know. Okay, so with no more at the renderings, I have one tail bit to say. We did have a discussion with GSX about that Hudson Ave project. Chris and I basically sat down, like we mentioned in our last meeting. We talked about them in a very preliminary sense about what perhaps a role the trust can play in that project. My main goal was to actually increase their affordable capacity from that 10% to 20% to hit that 23 units or 26 units. And see if we could do some work with them. So they're kind of in that, you know, I think they were the only bidders on that RFP for that property. So maybe they'll get awarded. I don't know. Ed can bring us up to date on that real quickly, but it's not on the agenda. So I just wanted to kind of just plug it in there real quick, and then I'll throw it on the agenda for some more conversation. But it was fruitful. I think they would have a place for us. And it would behoove us to kind of help them through their process, especially on Pine Street, from the trust perspective. It's something we've always talked about with developers. Some developers haven't led to much fruition, haven't needed us for much help. And some probably could have benefited greatly from it. They're outside players. They don't have a lot of in-state. I think one thing that could be said is they don't have a lot of understanding of the Commonwealth's 40B process and how elaborate it is. And I think they could use us for tapping us for some expertise in that process as well. Does anybody else have anything tonight? I'm going to give 1 second just to reiterate to all the people in attendance. Thank you very much for showing up. Thank you for sending and participating by sending letters and emails to us that we brought forward. By and large, they were very constructive, and I appreciate that. And so I assume the trust does as well. So continue to do so. If you have any questions about what was going on tonight, feel free to continue to email us. And understand that at a certain point, once I feel that the trust has all the information that it needs to make decision on its own, we're going to incorporate everybody and put as much public comment into this process as possible. We'll also continue on to the select board when we get to that point and we kind of narrow down where we're going to be, so we can have a dialogue with them. Because as everybody knows, we don't, in the LIP process, there's several points that we have to go through town. One of those is go to the select board. So we want to make sure, even if we don't have to do that, that we're kind of mimicking that friendly 40B process, because this town was generous enough to deed the land over to us. And we want to make sure that we're encouraging that relationship to grow. So I will then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor by roll call, starting with Kurt.
Williams, aye.
Ed.
Frisbee, aye.
Eric.
Munson, aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
And, well, I guess.
Just you, Bruce.
I'm going to be outvoted, so I'm just going to vote with the crowd, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.